All right, folks, this is a very special episode from the book marketing series. I've got my friend Mike Capuzzi on. Mike is the author of The Magic of Free Books, The Magic of Short Books. He talks about Shooks, 100-page books. And we're going to talk about how one pilot grew a real estate investment program just through book marketing. This really cool way a dentist actually got 3 new clients right away without spending a single dollar on ads through book marketing. The power of direct response in books. And why you probably shouldn't become an Amazon bestseller, but what it did for Mike. Mike, thanks for being on the Garlic Marketing Show.
Ian, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it.
And before we get started, this is, of course, brought to you by videocasestory.com. You should probably be putting your customer stories in your books. You should put your customer stories everywhere. Go to videocasestory.com to learn how to collect, craft, and deliver your customer stories. All right, let's get started. You know, Mike, why are short books valuable now?
Well, if I could, Ian, let me take one step back. I still think books are valuable, right? I mean, there's still, some people say, oh, who reads a book nowadays, blah, blah, blah. Everything's got to be digital and free and all that. But I still think in this day and age, a traditional book, a book that you can hold and see and read and put on a bookshelf and sign and autograph has a ton of value. They've been around in the marketing space for well over 100 years. I don't think they're going away anytime soon. So I think, nonfiction books are still very valuable. Now, I will contend that people's attention span is getting shorter. I know as I get older, I'm finding it harder and harder to read, the traditional 300-page business book. So I do think there's a nice little opportunity for shorter books that take about an hour to read. That's what we publish for our clients, about a 1-hour conversation in print form. They're about 12 to 15,000 words, which is a lot less than your typical 75 to 100,000 word business book. And they're about 100 pages. But they are, they're definitely real books. They're books that, you can hold and sign and give away. And so I think the focus and the fact they're, shorter makes it nicer for the reader, and it makes it a heck of a lot easier for the author.
And I think that's an important point, especially in B2B. And that's what I really, one of my takeaways too, is because, do you know the stat? What's the stat of how much a percentage of people read a whole book? You probably know it.
It's probably single digits.
Yeah.
And it probably depends on the book. It depends on the book. But listen, the reality is I look at myself. I am a person who used to feel very bad if I didn't read cover to cover. And I would say, most books that I'm reading these days, I'm struggling to get. Now, again, nonfiction, business-oriented. Fiction or something like that, it's not a problem. But a lot of these business books, I call them, they're bloated. They're books I call them books with bloat. And for certain, whatever reason, they're just redundant. They repeat themselves. They go off tangent. And I just think a lot of folks, appreciate tighter focus, so like a short book.
Not only tighter focus, but there's also a sense of it being done, right? It's like I picked this up and I'm like,
absolutely, yes.
I'm gonna get it done. I'm gonna read it. Like you said, like I might want to read all of this book, but I have so many books I've started, and I'm like, I don't have time for it.
Yeah. I think that's. By the way, I think as a marketer, excuse me, I just think it's a very real. Some people are like, people that help other people write books are like, it doesn't really matter if anyone reads it. It doesn't even matter if they crack it. Well, I don't believe that, and I do believe there is a certain positivity that happens when someone can say, hey, I read that book, I feel good. And even better is when they know what the next step is, which we can talk about. But I agree 100% with you, Ian. I think people do appreciate when they can read the entire thing.
Yeah, and what I love about your books is like, because they're targeted at one person. It's like, here, you can accomplish this one thing. And if you want to read the next book, there's another book. And instead of, having to go through this entire volume, you feel like you've accomplished something. I could speak to that person. And from a marketing standpoint, get it in the hand of the right person, have them read my idea, and possibly contact me. Mm-hmm. And so, I want to get into why this all works and how you're marketing with Magic Short Books. But you had a fighter pilot that you did this with 4 times over. Perfect example, right?
Yeah. He's actually working on his 5th Shook. So again, Shook is a short, helpful book. That's our brand. So Dom Tyke is a U.S. Air Force fighter pilot. I forget his status. I don't know if he's still active or if he's a reservist now. I know he's a trainer for other fighter pilots. So 2 years ago, he came to us right when COVID hit. And he has a side business for real estate investing, and he published his first Shook. And I don't know if people can see what I'm showing up, but the first Shook was Single Seat Investor. And what was cool about this, Ian, is a couple things that really are very unique about this. A, he was only targeting other fighter pilots and commercial pilots. So his client base for this real estate business are pilots. So he was able to hyper focus on who his reader is, and then he created a really unique type of investing opportunity for fighter pilots and commercial pilots, and he gave it a special name called Single Seat Investing. And that was his first Shook. Since then, he's gone on, published 3 others, working on a 4th one for a total of 5. And the cool one, which I know you want to talk about, is Single Seat Wisdom, where he's now creating compilation books to raise money for childhood cancer, where it's him and 19 other fighter pilots sharing their stories to inspire the next generation of fighter pilots.
So cool. So cool. And that's what I love about books too. And we had Michelle Prince on talking about working with nonprofits and books, is they have a bit more impact. I love video, but the books can have this impact that a lot of elements can, and have that nonprofit impact. That's really great. So can you describe to me the process of working with Don? How did he came to you? He's like, I got this idea. How did it come together and work for him?
Yeah, good question. So a little bit of history is required. So I actually have an engineering degree from Penn State University, and when I graduated college back in the 80s, I did engineering for a number of years. Then I migrated to an engineering software company, so I started learning the software industry, but still in the engineering space. And then at the height of the dot-com era, late 90s, I went out on my own. I actually left a really good job and started my own consulting company in 1998, and have been doing this ever since. So I share that, Ian, because I think like an engineer. 25 years later, I still think like an engineer, meaning I'm very methodical. I'm very, I was like 10 minutes early for this interview. It's just the way I operate, right? So I have developed, and I've been I have a good reputation and history of making complex things simple. So I've created a really unique way of going from idea. So Dom, he didn't have Single Seat Investor as an idea. It came as a part of this process, where I literally go from square one, which is what's my idea for my book, to about 12 weeks later, a printed book in hand if they follow the steps in a timely fashion. So it's a step-by-step process. I'm a marketer too, right? So we walk through, who's the target reader? What do you want them to accomplish by reading the book? What do you want to accomplish? Because these are direct response books. These are books that are meant to generate business, right? That's a key thing also. These aren't just books about putting a book out there. This is almost like a sales letter in book format. But, it's a step-by-step process to really just work, and I work directly with every client. So they're getting my 20-some-odd years of experience working on their book for them.
Love it. And so 12 weeks, you help them identify market, everything, start to finish?
Yep. The message, what their calls to action, which a lot of, book authors, nonfiction book authors completely miss that opportunity. How are they going to generate business from the book? How are they going to use the book once it's done? So yeah, it's an A to Z, opportunity.
And, once you got it out there for him, is it something you gave away for free? How did he use it then to build the business?
Yeah, so there's 2 things that are probably a little bit different than with our publishing opportunity. And again, I work with a lot of Main Street business owners. I work with a lot of coaches, consultants, corporate executives. So none of them are worried about selling books to make money, Ian, right? This is not about the $2 you might make on Amazon if you sell a book. We're happy to give them away as much as possible to the right readers. So one thing that's different is, we're not worried about making money on the front end of the book. The second thing is we typically, though I am working with a client right now, we're going to try to get her to become an Amazon bestseller. We don't play that game much either. It's just not something, I won't go into why, but it's just for our authors, it's about, getting the book done, using it effectively. If they can, sell a lot on Amazon, that's great. But typically, they just want to start using the thing and get it out there.
Yeah, and I want to make a distinction because we also had Alex, our mutual friend, on talking about Amazon ads, and even he's running ads, but it's not to make the book a bestseller. It's to make the book and get the book in the right hands of the people and get them into your funnel and as a direct response methodology, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I poo-pooed the whole bestseller thing for years. I even wrote about it in a couple of my books. But in 2020, 2020, yeah, 2 years ago, I actually got serious and really studied what it means and how Amazon, if you do it right, how do you try to get a book to be a number one bestseller? And we did. We turned the 100-page book, which I released in July of 2020, and it was a bestseller both in print and Kindle for like 8 months. We sold thousands and thousands, and Alex was part of that ride. But there is a whole science to doing it right. And there's some other back-end ways of doing it, but to do it right is a real science. It was very interesting.
And did that do anything for you?
Yeah, it did. It allowed me to say I was an Amazon bestseller, which again I poo-pooed for years. But we literally sold thousands. I mean, it was probably over 10,000 books over the last 2 years. So what does that mean? It means in all our books, and the 100-page book is no different, had calls to action for readers to opt into my different opportunities. So it was just a lead generation opportunity. So yeah.
And was there any unexpected consequences or results of becoming that bestseller?
For me, I think it was the fact that if you do it, if you do it right, it felt real, if that makes sense. Now, it's not real like even New York Times and those are sort of a pay-to-play game, I suppose. But when we were like 7 or 8 months in and it was still a number one bestseller, and then another consequence is it triggered, this was pretty cool, it triggered some of one of my other older shooks that was on Amazon to be a number one bestseller because people were buying it and then wanted to see my other ones like you mentioned earlier. So that I had a second bestseller come from it that I wasn't doing anything with. But it really, we got a ton of opt-ins on our list, and I know for a fact, we've got a number of new clients from it. I mean, most of our client acquisition for our publishing opportunities are coming from my books, which are just on Amazon. So, yeah, it works.
It works. It works, and I keep hearing over and over again, it works. And so let's talk about free books, because I'll be honest with you, I'm pretty sure I read your book originally on Kindle Unlimited. Is it on Kindle Unlimited?
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of got it for free. I'm paying for Kindle Unlimited because I like you said, I scan a ton of books, and then yours, because it was 100 pages, I finished it, and then I went to the next one. So I'm a perfect example of someone that and then we're here and we're talking.
Next thing is you got to become a client.
I know. Next thing is I've got to become a client, which might be happening. But so tell me, how do you work with free books? Because I know some people are like, let me just give away my book, give away my book, give away my book. And that's their magic of free books. But I'm assuming you, being an engineer, which I love, I think engineers make the best marketers, some of the best marketers and some of the best stock traders, but that's a whole nother story. What is the magic of free books? How does that work to make it work?
Well, I wrote a shook about it's called The Magic of Free Books. And again, being a geek about marketing, first of all, I presented the fact that marketers have been using free books since the late 1890s. So over 100 years ago, right? I show ads from the early 1900s for free books in a business context. So it's a proven strategy. Even though you still see them on Facebook and on TV today, it's not like these guys and women came up with anything new. It's a time-tested strategy. So, the first shift, Ian, is the author's willing to give it away, all right? Or at least give it away at a very nominal, maybe if it's free, and if you're shipping it to them, you charge for shipping. But it's about a different mindset, right? I'm going to give away a $5, it cost me $5 to print this book. I'm willing to give that away because I know my client is worth potentially, $5,000. So that's the first shift. Then the second thing is it's about getting it out there in as many ways as possible. So I mentioned we work with a lot of Main Street business owners, doctors, dentists, insurance agents, et cetera, lawyers. And local business owners have a lot of cool opportunities. They can display it in their office, in their practice. One of the coolest things that local business owners do, and I still have some that are doing it right now as we speak, is they create like a network of I call strategic partners. So for example, we had a dentist who unfortunately has passed away, but when he published his Shook, he was a type of dentist that didn't use mercury. All right, so it's like a really unique type of dentistry. No fluoride, no mercury, holistic dentistry. So he placed his book literally like I did behind me, like in cases in places where people that are worried about their health would be visiting, chiropractors' offices, health food stores, gyms. And he just put it out there and said, hey, take a free copy, put a little sign. I have it right over here, a little free book. And within the first month of doing that, Ian, of just putting his book in places where his potential customers would be hanging out, he got three new patients worth a couple $1,000s each. So like that's a really cool strategy, right? Obviously, online marketers can do the same thing with funnels and joint ventures, but it's really about just, in my book, The Magic of Free Books, I outline 51 ways. There's just so many ways to leverage a book, online, offline, that it's one of the most versatile marketing assets you can create, in my opinion.
I agree. And, I think another thing is, and have you started incorporating like video/QR codes into your Shooks?
Not mine, but guess what? As soon as I told you I have a client call after this. That client, he's got QR codes throughout his Shook. I think Dom has them in here in the Single Seat Investor. He's got QR codes. So yeah, I call them calls to action, whether it's a QR code, a download or something. You put these calls to action in the book to get interested readers to take the next step. And then, and to elongate that relationship.
And what I love about them too is there's a bit of authority that you can't get anywhere else, right? And also it's the relic factor, the tangible factor that you see behind me, right? It's if someone sends me, I've got books. In fact, my wife's like, "Do you want these books?" Books people sent to me, and I'm like, they're like 12 years old, and I'm like, she's like, "You don't need these books." I'm like, "Yes, I do," and I'm hoarding them, right? But they remind me of the person, and you pick them up, and they remind you of the person, and especially if it's a small book, you're like, "Oh, this one's not taking up any space," right. And it makes me think of them. I think it's fantastic. And so now, do you also use this? Do you drive people to an audiobook? How do you incorporate the audiobook marketing into the free book?
So a certain percentage of our authors we just print the books for them. So they're just the local dentist doesn't need to be up on Amazon. So he or she has a paperback version for their office, for example, and then we give them a digital version which they can use on their website. It's not a Kindle version; it's a unique version we use. However, certain of our authors are on Amazon, and we do create the print book, the Kindle book, and optionally an audiobook. I will tell you with my own Shooks, the order of sales numbers, which is very interesting, is Kindle's first, print second, and audiobooks are third. So it's always interesting. I don't sell nearly as many audiobooks as I do Kindle and print. But it's just an option for them. If they feel like they want an audiobook, we do that. We have that service for them.
And so when you start to make these books and you're getting them into your funnel and you're using them in direct response, at what point, like you said, you've had clients, you've made multiple books. Where are you going? I need to make the next book. Are you planning that ahead of time?
Yeah, well, boy, I wish, because mine would have been a lot clearer. Now, mine happened sort of like, hey, I have an idea. In hindsight, so what I do, the thing I do, Ian, is, and Amazon allows this pretty easily, is I'm updating my books on Amazon. So, and we send out people who got the Kindle version, they get an update, but there's things that I'm updating and sort of like fitting it in better. I wish I had it planned out. With our clients, I tend to work with them and ask that question. Do you think you have a series here? If you do, let's map that out. But the real beauty of these things, and I say this often, I was even encouraging you before we hit record, like if you think you have got a 200 or 300 page book, would it make sense? Now, there are times, like you said, like a thought leader book, a book that might be traditionally published, where you want that sort of thud factor, where it's a big book. But oftentimes I'll ask clients, like, is it better to serve your readers by having 3 100-page books versus 1 300-page book? It gives you 3 ways to market differently. You can break up the content differently. You look like a multi-book author versus a single book author. So, I think there's a lot of, opportunity there to think about how you slice and dice content, and should it be 1 book or should it be 3 books?
Yeah, there is that marketing factor. We were talking about it with Alex, and I've talked about a few people. Like once you have a back catalog, right? It's you have a catalog of books. It's probably an exponential increase. Like you said, once you hit that bestseller list with 1 book, now all of a sudden this other book is selling more because it's probably getting suggested more, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's super powerful. And once you started doing these, how have you seen people's authority change, and what has that meant to them? Because it is definitely an authority builder, but yes, it's great to lead gen. But I hear from our clients all the time. It's like once they get the videos out there, it's the conversations with my client. People come in, they feel like they know me already, and I've never met them before. Yeah. Is that the kind of thing that you're seeing with the Shooks?
Yeah, and I would say, so much so that I have a podcast about it, Ian. I have a podcast called The Author Factor, and it's about what it means to be a nonfiction business book author. And I always ask that question, like, what does it mean? And probably the number one answer and we're up to 110, 115 episodes as you and I are recording this, is it does build authority. And for a lot of, guys like you and I who are really in the marketing world, we sort of see a lot of things, right? But for the local dentist, the local retailer, the local physician, when someone gets his or her book and asks it for it to be autographed or says, hey, I read your book, that's pretty cool. Guys like you and me, maybe we're a little more jaded, a little more seasoned, but it's pretty cool when you read a book and someone brings it in and says, hey, I read this, I'm here because of it. And it happens all the time. One real quick story, if I could. My daughter, 3 years ago, was going into her senior year of high school. It was right about 3 years ago right now, or 4 years ago, I apologize, it was 2018. And it was right about just, almost it was July 4th weekend. And I said to her, I said, listen, we should do something special this summer to help you, raise some money, yada, yada, yada. So on July 4th, we came up for an idea for a book for her to create, Ian. By Labor Day, so what, 2 months later, 2.5 months later, she had a published book. It's sitting over here. It's called Dog Joy. We had just rescued our first dog. So she did a compilation book. Compilation books are nice because she only had to write 1 chapter. 25 other people contributed a chapter about how they rescued a dog. She raised almost $6,000 for dog rescues. She was featured on the front page of a bunch of local newspapers and magazines here in the Philadelphia area. And we didn't even think about this when we were doing it, but she used it as a way to differentiate herself when she was applying to colleges. She got into every college she applied to. She got letters from the 2 different deans saying how cool it would be to have an author as a freshman in their school. She got scholarship offers. So again, here's a kid that, if you're looking at what kid to accept, A or B, and this one raised all this money by being, a book author and publishing a book, that definitely set her apart. So whether it's a teenager or, I'm talking to another client, he's in his 80s. I have a client right now who's in his 80s, Ian. I told him he should retire. He's in his 80s. He's publishing a Shook.
Nice. And you're never too young or too old. And I can only imagine the level of success that sets your daughter up for just that idea. It's gotten over that boundary of publishing your first book. Even if it's short, do you see that a lot? Does that happen where people now have published their first one and now it just becomes so much easier?
Yeah. Well, I told you, there's Dom Tyke, right? He's got a whole staff of them now, right? Yeah. The answer, because it's like anything. The bug, it bites you, and you say, hey, it wasn't that bad. And by the way, I think anybody listening to this probably and probably ought to consider publishing a short book. If they're helping people, they can write a short book. So yeah, it does. They see the opportunity, and they get that success behind them, and see how people are gravitating towards them. Yeah,
That's awesome. Now, okay, I've got my book published. I'm a marketing agency. What's the number one thing, the number one marketing piece that you would tell them to do right away?
Well, I would have told you early on that actually writing the book is the easy part. Believe it or not, marketing the book is the hard part. And what I mean by that, Ian, is I say this all the time on my podcast, the consistent, persistent use. These things don't do anybody any good if they're sitting in a box in a closet, right? So everyone gets excited. I published a book. I wrote a book. It's published. They've got, they order their copies. They're in a box. And then all of a sudden life gets in the way and they stop marketing it. So the first thing is actually way before the book is done is, what is the plan to use this? Now, to answer your specific question, oftentimes it depends. I mean, if they're a local business owner, I always encourage them to consider doing a press release, believe it or not, like sending out a media release to their local media. Hey, new book, on the topic. That has worked very well for some of our clients. If they're an online marketer, they have like an online presence, obviously doing social media, emailing your list. It's just like, I always say it's publishing a book like this for your business. It's a long-term play. It can last decades. I mean, I've got books I've published years ago that are still working for me. So you've got to look at it as a long-term play. It's not this thing like, hey, it's done and I'm going to do a couple weeks of promotion and then forget about it because you won't be successful.
That's such a good point. Alex said it too, and I keep hearing it over and over again. It's like if you spend 1,000 hours writing it, you need to spend at least 1,000 hours marketing it, and just keep talking about it. And you guys have to watch Mike Michalowicz's episode because he had one of the newest ways of promoting his book I've seen that for $25. I'm not going to tell you because you got to listen to his episode. Mike, I'll tell you after.
Good for you.
But awesome. And so the author factor is the podcast, and you've put together a little gift for the audience at mikecapuzzi.com/magic. That's with 2 Z's. And of course, the link will be down below in the show notes or on YouTube. But Mike, tell me what we get there.
So I'm putting I've written a couple books, The Magic of Short Books, The Magic of Free Books, The Magic of Shooks. So I thought, geez, and this literally just came to me an hour before this interview. And I thought, I had the thought before. I thought, why don't I create the Shook Magic Kit? So by the time this is airing, we'll have our Shook Magic Kit, which will be a way for you to be able to read all of those short, helpful books online for free, and some other goodies. I'm not going to say what they are, but I got some other goodies. So it's going to be a little kit for your listeners. They just go to mikecapuzzi.com/magic, and they'll be able to get that. Nice.
Well, I'm super, super excited for that. And of course, we've got the Author Factor podcast, and we'll put a link to the books. We'll put a link to Magic of Short Books. We'll put a link to the Magic of Free Books. All the links in there. And Mike, where do you spend your most time on social media? Where should we link to there?
Facebook, LinkedIn. I don't spend a lot of time on social media, Ian, but Facebook or LinkedIn.
All right, we'll put a link to both of those. But Mike, thank you so much for being on this book marketing series on the Garlic Marketing Show.
Ian, I appreciate it. You're doing great work. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for taking Mike and I on your journey. Think about a short book. This has been Ian Garlic and the Garlic Marketing Show.